Being on YouTube with 130,000 subscribers generates a lot of motorcycle conversation. You guys leave me questions here on YouTube in the comments. You reach out through Facebook and Twitter, comments and questions on the forums. So when you guys talk, I listen, and I grab those questions and I put them in a document for future videos. And this week on MCrider, I want to address some of those questions, all related to motorcycle tires. Hey, my name's Kevin. I'm the host here at MCrider, where I release a weekly video on motorcycle skills or road strategy to help make you a better rider. You can subscribe to us here on YouTube, hit the bell icon, you'll get notifications of every new video, or go to mcrider.com/email, and I'll send you the newest video in an email every Friday afternoon. You know, your motorcycle tires are arguably the most important piece of equipment on your motorcycle. If the tires are not operational, you're not going anywhere. And if they're not in very good shape, you may not be going anywhere for very long. So it's in our best interest as riders to pay attention to what's going on with our tires. And I've received a lot of questions on this subject, so I thought I would answer a few of those in this week's video. So one of the most common questions I get is, how long does a motorcycle tire last? Well, there's two parts to that answer. There's two things that affect your motorcycle tire, and that's age and wear. Now, a lot of people don't realize that tires just get old. They're like produce in the grocery store. They have a limited shelf life. So even if that tire has never been mounted, it does have a certain age that you want to use it within. And you can see in the picture up on the screen, the 4-digit code that's on every motorcycle tire. First two numbers are the week that that tire was produced in, and the second two numbers are the year that the tire was produced in. You can get that information to tell you how old that tire is. Now, as a general rule, 5 to 7 years is about the age of a tire. After that time, the rubber becomes harder and it becomes more susceptible to cracking and not performing like it should on the road. So 5 to 7 years. And the sportier the tire, the less shelf life it's got. So that would be at the bottom end of that 5-year range, because the compounds on a sport tire, something made for a sport bike, are softer, and those rubbers don't last as long as something made for a touring or a cruiser, which you may be able to get 7 years out of that before that tire needs to be replaced. So what about wear on the tire? How do you know when a tire is worn out through use? Well, again, we can look at the tire. You can see in the diagram here, there are wear bars on a motorcycle, and when the tread depth gets worn down so that that wear bar is equal to the rest of the tread, it's time to go find a new tire. That's about 1 millimeter in depth, but you can look for these wear bars to give you a good general idea of when it needs to be replaced. And that's most likely going to occur in the center of the tire, because most of your time is spent riding straight up and down. So those wear bars are going to wear out quickest or get even with the tread in the center of the tire. So that's primarily where you want to look. If you've got a center stand, that's where it comes in real handy. You can put the bike in neutral, get the bike up on the center stand, and you can easily spin the rear wheel to check for punctures or to check that wear bar to make sure that you've got enough tread on it. And it makes it much easier to spin the front wheel as well to get a good look at that tire also. The next question I got was about new tire break-in. So how do you break in a new set of tires? Well, there's a common misconception. It's something that was partially true in the past. Tire manufacturers used a release agent on the molds when they would make a new set of tires, similar to putting non-stick spray on a pan when you're cooking, and it would allow the tire to release from the molds easier, but it would make that tire slick when you first use it. Well, nowadays most tire manufacturers only use that release agent on the sidewalls so that their logo and the numbers and things like that come out clear, but they don't use it as much on the tread. But Pirelli, one of the leading manufacturers of tires, suggests that you get a tire up to about 165 degrees for 10 minutes to release the oils and other compounds that are going to leach to the surface of a new tire. So in order to break that tire in, just simply ride on it. Spend about 10 or 15 minutes, get the tire up to temperature, but just take some extra precaution on that new tire because it will be slicker initially as those oils release from the tires. But it's not nearly as bad as the old days where that release agent would really cause a new tire to be slick. Just ride around on it, give it 10 or 15 minutes, get the tire up to temperature, and then you can start trusting the traction a little bit more to do what it's supposed to. So the next one didn't really come to me in the form of a question as much as a statement. Like I wanted to share one of his mistakes that he made, and that's putting tire dressing on a motorcycle tire. Now, you guys have probably all washed your car and you've taken Armor All or something similar, put it on the sidewalls, and man, that tire sure looks good when you get done. You do that on a motorcycle, you could be asking for some serious trouble, because our rider in this instance shined his new motorcycle up and wanted to dress the tires up, so he put Armor All on the tires and immediately had a crash when he got out on the road because that tire was extremely slick from putting Armor All on it. Now, experienced riders may hear this and think, man, that's a dumb move on that guy's part, but if you don't know, you don't know. So I'm here to tell you now, don't put tire dressing on your motorcycle tires. If you need to clean them, soap and water when you're washing the bike, get it rinsed off, and just let that tire do what it's supposed to do as far as looks. And that way it's going to provide the best performance for you when you get out on the road. Now, the next one I hear on occasion, and that's, what are my thoughts on putting car tires on a motorcycle? So some of you may not have ever heard of this, but it's called the dark side, is the affectionate name that these guys refer to themselves as. And I first came in contact with this when I had a Honda Valkyrie. I went to a wrench party, some guys getting together to work on their Valkyries, and I went and hung out with them. And several of these guys had car tires on the back of their Valkyrie, and they swore by it, saying that it was cheaper to buy the tires, the car tires, that they lasted longer, and it provided better traction to them. And they wanted to talk me into putting a car tire on the back of my Valkyrie. This was before I was a riding instructor and before I had researched it a whole lot, but I politely declined and decided to stick with the motorcycle tire. And now I'm glad that I did, because I know a whole lot more about motorcycle dynamics now than I did in those days. And I just wouldn't trust a car tire on the back of a motorcycle. So let me explain a few reasons why. Well, if you're riding in a straight line, a car tire makes sense because a car tire's profile is flat, where a motorcycle tire is round. So you take that flat profile, if you're riding just in a straight line, your contact patch is going to be a little bit bigger. You're going to have better acceleration traction, you're going to have a little better braking traction, and a motorcycle is going to feel balanced. But one thing when a motorcycle tire wears out is it wears out in the center, so you get a flat spot in the center. And I know from experience that riding on a motorcycle tire with that flat spot, as you lean the motorcycle into the corner, I can actually feel it as it goes over that little ridge and you lean into the corner. When you do this on a motorcycle with a car tire on the back of it, you lean the motorcycle over, you're actually getting on the corner or the edge of that car tire, and you're asking it to do something that it was never designed to do. So you're putting a whole lot more flex into that tire. So what a lot of these guys recommend is riding the car tire at a lower air pressure than what you would find on the sidewall to allow the tire to flex. Well, now you're creating another problem because you're making the sidewall of that tire flex in a way that it was never designed to do. And that creates issues with the bead. And the bead is the area where the tire seals up to the wheel. So now you're flexing that sidewall and you're putting more pressure on the bead that wasn't really designed to adhere to a motorcycle rim to begin with. So there's a lot of issues technically from using a car tire on a motorcycle, but also that a motorcycle turns by leaning. And that's why the profile on a motorcycle tire is round, so that as you lean over, your contact patch stays similar and it's much more predictable than it would be on a car tire. So if all you ever did was ride in a straight line, if you had a drag bike and all you did was run up and down quarter-mile strips, a car tire might be okay. But when it comes to cornering and it comes to emergency situations, I want what's designed for my motorcycle. Now, I could save a few bucks and I could put a car tire on the back. I know a lot of guys do on Road Kings as well, but I'm going to err on the side of safety. I mean, if I had a brain tumor, I wouldn't go find the best chiropractor here in DFW to help me out with the brain tumor. I would want the doctor that specializes in that and knows what he's talking about and can provide the surgery that I need. Same thing in an emergency situation on a motorcycle. It's not when I want to hope that that car tire, the bead is going to hold up and it's going to allow me to swerve and get out of the way of that obstacle. I want what's been designed for my motorcycle, and I know it's going to perform. Similar to putting a $20 helmet on your head. You can put a $20 helmet on there and it looks hard and it's got a face shield, but is it going to hold up in a crash? I'm going to rely more on a name brand helmet and one that I know has been tested and is going to give me the best possible outcome from the crash. So that's my opinion on car tires on motorcycles. I know a lot of you guys are going to leave comments below because there is a fanatic adherence to using car tires on motorcycles, and I'd love for you guys to leave a comment below, but it's one of those things you'll never convince me of. I'm going to stick with what I know is going to work, and that's using motorcycle tires on motorcycles and leaving the car tires for the cars. So here's a common question that I've heard before, and that's about using race tires on a street motorcycle or out on the street. Because a race tire is going to be a softer compound, it's going to have more traction in theory. So why shouldn't you just put race tires on your motorcycle if you want to have the best available traction out on the street? I actually heard somebody standing on the sidelines at a CMRA race one time, listening to a conversation of two guys standing next to me, and the guy said, "Man, I just don't trust street tires after racing a little bit, so I keep race tires on my motorcycles all the time because I know I'm going to have better traction." Well, there's some problems with that because tires are manufactured to a very specific job, and race tires are no exception to that. And the problem with using race tires on the street is a race tire has to get up to a really high temperature in order to operate at its peak performance. If it doesn't get up to that temperature, it's going to have a hard time. It's going to be a lot harder than what it's supposed to be. And the problem on the street is there's no way that you can ride within the legal limits and get that tire up to the temperature it needs. It's designed to be going hard through the corners and all out on the straightaways. So it takes that type of riding in order to get the compound up to temperature. That's why you see race bikes on the sidelines with the tire warmers, and they'll wrap it around the tire in order to keep the tire warm so that there's less heat that they have to get into it when they get out on the track. And another problem with it, and the reason why they use the tire warmers as well, is because a race tire only has a certain number of heat cycles. So what do we mean by heat cycles? Well, as you get out on the track, that tire warms up, and then you pull over to the side, the tire cools down, unless you put a tire warmer on it. So one heat up and one cool down would be a heat cycle. And race tires are created with just a limited number of heat cycles that they can withstand. About 3 or 4, actually, before that tire begins to break down because it's been heated up and it's cooled down over time. So that's why they use the tire warmers, because it reduces the number of heat cycles that that tire has to go through. And that's a problem with riding it on the street, is you heat the tire up, you cool it down. You heat the tire up, you cool it down. in just a few trips, you've gone through the recommended number of heat cycles for that tire, and it doesn't perform as it should. So street tires on the street, race tires on the racetrack, and that's going to give you the best performance for your motorcycle on the street. Another question I hear frequently is, how do you deal with tire punctures? And this is another one where people have opinions to the extreme on both sides of it. Some people will say, well, just plug the tire and keep going. Other people will say, never, ever ride on a plug. Some people will say, take the tire off and patch it from the inside. Some people will say, go immediately to the dealer and get a new tire. I can tell you what I have done in the past. I've plugged tires, and I've ridden for several thousand miles on a plugged tire with no issues. The one thing that you want to watch out for, in my opinion, is where the puncture is. So if it's in the center portion of the tire, I have no problem plugging it and using a good quality plug in order to seal that hole up. But the closer it gets to the sidewall, you're making the tire lean over, and you're putting stress or more stress on that plug or repair when the motorcycle is leaned over. So my general rule of thumb, if it's within the first few inches of the center of the tire, I've plugged it and I've ridden with it successfully. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will, but it's what I've done and what has worked well for me. And I've also had tires that I've had a plug in and I've gotten a second puncture. Didn't really feel good about having two plugs in there, so I went and got the tire replaced. So it's one of those things. Do you trust the plug? Do you trust the patch? Or do you want to go get a new tire? Many manufacturers will say that it's totally possible to repair a tire if it's in the center, like we were talking about, with a patch from the inside. And some of them will say it's even okay to plug the tire, which I've done and been successful with. So leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you guys think about plugging a tire as well. Another important aspect of motorcycle care is tire pressure. That's something that you want to keep track of. Even if you go out on a trip, you want to make sure you're checking it periodically to make sure you've not had a puncture along the way. But even in the winter time, you'll lose air or you'll lose pressure because the tires are colder. So you'll have to carry a little more air in them during the winter time than you might during the summer. Now, one of the best things that I've found, and you can't always see this because I keep it mounted on the wall back behind the Road King behind us, but it's on the wall back there, and it's this tire pressure pump. And what I like about these little pumps is it's got this gauge on it, and I can set whatever tire pressure I want the tire to be at. So, you know, on the Road King, 36 on the front, so I'll hit 36 and put this on the tire, and if the tire is low, it's going to fill it up to the PSI that I set it for. And it's really convenient to be able to have this. I even put this little decal on here that tells me what the tire pressure I want for the front and rear on the Road King and the XSR. So this has been very helpful for me. I'll have a link to this. They're pretty cheap off of Amazon. You can keep these, they're rechargeable. You can even stick it in the saddlebag when you go on a trip, and you'll know that you've got a pump, and you can check your tire pressure and add air to it if you need to when you're out on the road. Also, I've found the tire pressure gauge on these to be very accurate. I've got a good gauge hanging on the wall back there, but I rarely use that anymore because this has been very accurate to my tire pressure gauge that's hanging on the pegboard back behind us. So in addition to keeping track of your tire pressure, you want to also keep track of the condition of the tires. And when you're checking the tire pressure, that's a good time to do that. Now, if you got a bike with the center stand, it makes it much easier. It's kind of a pain on the Road King because I have to take one of the saddlebags off in order to get access to add air to it or to check the tire for wear and tear. But the things that you want to look for cracks within the tire. That's telling you that the tire is getting a little bit old and may need to be replaced. You want to check the wear bars like we talked about earlier to make sure you've got sufficient tread on it. And you want to make sure that there's nothing embedded in the tire. Along the way, the years that I've been riding, I've picked up nails. I've picked up all kinds of different objects in tires. One time I was spinning the tire checking it, and I found a tooth embedded in the tire, and I think this was probably a puppy tooth from Major that I rolled back over pulling out of the garage. But yeah, you'll find all kinds of weird stuff in the tires, but if anybody can beat a puppy tooth embedded in your tire, leave a comment below, because I'd love to hear from you. But you want to check the tires, the condition, the wear on the tires, and make sure they're in good shape. There's no more important piece of equipment on your motorcycle, because without a good set of tires, you're not going anywhere. And if they're in bad shape, you get out on the road, you may not be going anywhere for very long. So leave some comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think and hear your expert opinions on tires as well, and some tips and ideas that you've got that will help other riders out as well. We'll be continuing this discussion over on the forums, and you can get access to the forums by becoming a member on YouTube at MCrider.com/member, or supporting the channel on Patreon through MCrider.com/support. Either way, you'll get access to the forums and the field guide, where we'll continue this discussion, and the field guide with some exercises to help make you a better rider. So until next week, guys, keep those questions coming. But this is Kevin with MCrider, and we'll see you on the road. There are multiple ways to support the channel. You can become a member on YouTube at MCrider.com/member, or support the channel through Patreon at MCrider.com/support. Either way, you'll get full access to the forum and the field guides, which will further the training that we release here on a weekly basis.